For centuries, Mont Saint-Michel and its breathtaking bay have exercised a powerful attraction. Home to both a famous pilgrimage centre and a thriving Benedictine abbey, its long history is closely intertwined with that of Normandy and France. The monastery is perched on a rock isolated in the middle of the bay, protected by the incessant ebb and flow of the tides. Constructed as a place of monastic prayer, the magnificent buildings crowning the rock trace the evolution of Romanesque and Gothic architecture, and together constitute a unique testimony to the civilization of the Middle Ages. In the 14th and 15th centuries, a remarkable infrastructure of defensive military architecture, including thick walls, ramparts, towers and bastions, was constructed around the monastery. The ramparts were designed as a response to new developments in warfare, resulting from the recent introduction of the cannon. The ramparts had to be very high and reinforced by even higher towers. In order to take control of this circular fortification, perched on a sheer rock, the enemy would have had to scale the walls or pass under them. The solidity of the monastery's defences, together with the help of the tides, disrupted enemy offensives, putting an end to the 25,000-strong English army and to a siege that had lasted 30 years. The heroic resistance of Mont Saint-Michel to English attacks during the 100 Years' War made it a symbol of French national identity. In a new era of warfare, towers and curtain walls were kept fairly low so as to offer a smaller target for artillery. The entire bay, the site of Europe's most powerful tides, lies spread out around the base of the abbey, providing a stupendous panorama that combines the prodigious accomplishments of medieval architecture, forces of nature, and ever-changing light. The abbey's main entrance leads to the courtyard of the avancée. Two large cannons captured from the English have been preserved in the courtyard. A new forward gate beyond the boulevard, known as the avancée, was added around 1525 in order to fortify the entrance to the village. It consisted of a triangular courtyard surrounded by a wall with two openings. The 14th century arch of the King's Gate is equipped with a portcullis and machicolations. It is preceded by a moat, over which a drawbridge, rebuilt in 1992, can be lowered. It was called King's Gate because it also housed the officer responsible for guarding it on behalf of the French king. The narrow, cobblestoned Grand Rue circles up to the monastery in three steep spirals. It is bordered, at its lowest level, by houses that have survived from the 15th and 16th centuries. Tiled and slate roofs, coloured wooden facades, wood, plaster and rock, balconies, window baskets, and classic shop fronts create a patchwork of history and colour. The delicate pathways of the mount gradually slope upwards as narrow alleyways snake around the houses, gradually leading to the imposing walls of the abbey. The mount's small village turned to commerce to make its livelihood. The inhabitants, who settled on the rock in the 10th century, undoubtedly included fishermen, but the majority of them sold souvenirs or kept inns, their fortunes rising and falling with the mount's reputation as a place of pilgrimage. Mont Saint-Michel constitutes a unique aesthetic realization, which may be attributed to the unprecedented union of the natural site and the architecture. The ramparts were built in order to protect the city and also served to defend the abbey. This extraordinary and perfectly preserved group of defences is one of the finest and most important achievements of medieval military architecture. Magnificent views over the bay with its impressive tides can be had by strolling around the ramparts of Mont Saint-Michel. At Mont Saint-Michel, the relationship between architecture and environment is exceptionally rich. This wonder of the Western world forms a tower in the heart of an immense bay. Legend has it that Aubert, Bishop of Avranches, built and consecrated a small church in 709 at the request of the Archangel Michael. In 966, a community of Benedictines settled on the rock at the request of the Duke of Normandy, and the pre-Romanesque church was built before the end of the first millennium. In the 11th century, the Romanesque abbey was established on a set of crypts, where the rock comes to an apex. The first monastery buildings were constructed against its northern wall. It was the masters of the Gothic period, profiting as best they could from the constricted area, who invented the high walls, the soaring masses, the open volumes, and the airy pinnacles on which the sharp silhouette of the rock is so harmoniously reflected. The stones used to build the abbey were brought by boat from nearby quarries, then hauled up the steep slopes by ropes and sheer human strength. This strenuous undertaking took centuries, but paid off beautifully. Mont Saint-Michel is one of the most important sites of medieval Christian civilization. The Châtelet Gate was defended by machicolations and a portcullis that prevented access to the staircase, known as the gouffre, or abyss, which led up to the abbey. The Grand Degré, a wide flight of stairs leading between the sheer walls of the compound and those of the abbey, rises almost 20 metres to the gargoyles that crown it. Arched walkways join the high levels, and Gothic windows adorn the spaces between the buttresses. The Grand Degré leads to the abbey entrance, from which a wider flight of stone steps climbs to the Sargotier Terrace, named after a prisoner who jumped to his death from here. From the west terrace, which serves as a parvis to the abbey church, there is a superb view over the bay. The colour of the sand and sea are in constant flux, reflecting the sky like a great mirror. The terrace was enlarged after the fire of 1776, after which the abbey monks were forced to demolish the first 3 bays of the church's nave. Although the bay may appear welcoming, tempting walkers onto its sands, its incredible tides make it perilous. The sea surges into the bay on an incoming tide at an average speed of 3.7 kilometres per hour, and in certain places and times it can move considerably faster. Opening onto the terrace is the church, whose present facade, added in 1780, has a very simple design. 2 tiers of columns, surmounted by a triangular pediment, harmonise relatively successfully with the Romanesque architecture that dominates the rest of the building. Together with Rome and St. Jacques de Compostelle, this great spiritual and intellectual centre was one of the most important places of pilgrimage for the medieval Occident. For nearly 1,000 years, men, women and children went there by roads called paths to paradise, hoping for the assurance of eternity, given by the Archangel of Judgment, Peseur des Armes. It was at the request of the Archangel Michael, chief of the celestial militia, that Aubert, Bishop of Avranches, built and consecrated a small church on the 16th of October, 709. Inside the chancel, or choir, of the abbey is one of the most elegant surviving examples of the late Gothic flamboyant style. A regular crossing is flanked by transepts built over deep vaulted crypts. These 2-storied constructions are covered by a barrel vault attributed to the 11th century architect Raoul. The Romanesque church consists of a combination of complex forms. A series of low, twin bays are housed beneath relieving arches. During the 11th century, the rise of powerful dynasties, including the Ottoman, Capetian and Norman, together with the growth in popularity of pilgrimages to both Compostela and Saint-Michel, conspired to encourage new building and, along with it, new developments in architecture. A new concept of the nature of the supporting structure served to receive the weight of the vaulting. The church possesses a Gothic-style chancel and a Romanesque nave. The walkway in the triforium passes behind and through the pillars. Light floods in through the impressively high clerestory windows, highlighting the moulding of the surrounding masonry. Despite severe restrictions in terms of space, the architects succeeded in opening up 7 chapels off the aisles and ambulatory. With its ambulatory, the building conforms to a pattern typical of pre-1050 Norman architecture. The cloister was a place of silence set aside for meditation and prayer. The walls on the garden side consist of a double row of frail-looking arches with colonnettes set in a quincunx pattern, linked at the top by diagonal arches. It forms a series of stable tripods supporting the weight of the roof. The cloister served as a covered passageway between the abbey building and the church. Three arches overlook the sea and thus make the cloister a belvedere. The landscapes of the bay are of great diversity, a maritime scene of grass, sand dunes and cliffs. The delicacy of the cloister stands in marked contrast to the powerful architecture of the other parts of the abbey. The cloister had to be constructed on the monastery's third story, above the knight's chamber. The enclosed garden, replanted in 1965, adds to the charms of this luminous corner of the abbey. The whole site has been returned to its former glory thanks to an ongoing restoration project. The greater part of the abbey church underwent extensive restoration in the 19th century and at the beginning of the 20th century, carried out by Victor Petitgrand and Paul Gaut. A small staircase provides access to the abbey's steeple and dome. The exuberance of the external decoration contrasts sharply with the sobriety of the interior. The lateral thrust, imposed by ribbed vaulting on the pillars that support it, has a tendency to make buildings in the Gothic style bulge outwards. Medieval master builders had the idea of redirecting these lateral forces by means of permanent supports or flying buttresses. The architecture of this site tells its own story, from the pre-Romanesque through the Romanesque, the Gothic and late Gothic, to the flamboyant Gothic. The difficulties presented by this site, particularly the steep rocky slopes of the mount itself, are a clear indication of the determination of the builders, who also had to face fire, earth tremors and war. They also bear witness to the tripartite society of the Middle Ages, in which the military, laity and clergy live side by side in a sometimes uneasy coexistence. The breathtaking sight of this great architectural pyramid standing between sea and sky serves as a symbolic reminder that for centuries the Mount was one of Europe's great spiritual centres. The panoramic view that can be had from the top of the Abbey is unique. Today, more than 3.5 million visitors flock here every year, and a third of them explore the mysteries of the Abbey.